All across America and around the world, this is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Jesse Gould. He is the founder and president of Heroic Hearths Project, which you've probably never heard of, which is why we're bringing him to Veteran Radio listeners. Jesse, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me, and hopefully you'll hear more and more about our nonprofit as well as our work as the world starts to change around this important topic.
It will, and I think they will. That's why we're doing this, is because the current administration has kind of changed its position on psychedelic drugs for mental health purposes. And this is something you've been working on at Heroic Hearths Project since 2017. But let's set this up a little bit. This nice Florida kid goes to Cornell, gets an economics degree in 2009. What's a kid from an Ivy League do? He goes into investment banking. Okay, so far that all seems like according to script. And then he enlists in the U.S. Army. He doesn't go in as an officer. He goes in as a grunt with an eye on, I want to make it to Airborne Ranger School. So tell us a little bit about that thinking and how that was received by all those folks who said, life is now good. He's an investment banker from Cornell.
Yeah, I think my parents had the same question and disbelief. So that required many conversations. And at the time, I really wasn't able to verbalize why I was making that decision. It really was this gut feeling. And one dynamic is when I graduated is 08, 09 during the financial collapse. So I kind of got to see I loved finance, but it was also sort of the height of greed that caused this huge repercussions around the world, really. And it was just an interesting time to be on Wall Street there. And also there's just nothing moving. I always had this desire, or I guess intrigue, by the military. I always really respected people who went in, especially those. You always hear these stories in World War II of actors and professionals that volunteered even though they didn't have to. And I grew up always just very much admiring people sacrificing so much for something bigger than them. And here I was in this juxtaposition of people who did the opposite of sacrificing for something bigger than them. They took till the system collapsed. And I also got out of college and I just felt still like a dopey kid. And I was expecting, to be this, well-thought, well-spoken man. But our society has kind of lost sense of this coming of age or these traditions that signal these transitions. And I just didn't really test myself the way I thought college would. And so this culmination of forces that came together, and the more I thought about the military, the more it just intrigued me and was sort of this desire, and the universe kind of came together as, okay, well, nothing's going on Wall Street, and I've always wanted to do this. I always wanted to test my mettle. and let me go into doing it. And at the same time, I realized if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it full out, right? I wanted to try to go some sort of special
Let's
operations.
do it the hard way. Let's see if we can qualify as a ranger.
Exactly. I didn't feel like a economics degree qualified me as a leader in the military by any means. And if you're going to do something, do it full on, right? So I wanted to go in from the bottom, prove myself, see what it was like to be a grunt, see what it was like to be sort of the most stereotypical army guy possible, the infantry person, and then take it as far as it would go, which ended up being through ranger selection, going to ranger regiment, becoming a non-commissioned officer in the mortar platoon there, and multiple deployments to Afghanistan.
Yeah, in the I think it's 4 years that you served, you had 3 deployments to Afghanistan. This was at a time when the op tempo was really hot. Tell us a little bit about your, maybe even growing up, if you will, in those experiences in Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to put yourself into that mind frame, and this often doesn't make sense to civilians, but more so to veterans. But when you're deploying, it's almost a relief because the training cycle, especially for Rangers cycle in, and they're one of the most deployed units because every year they're going essentially spend half the year training, half the year deploying, and the training cycle is almost more tedious and exhausting than the deployment because you want to be ready, right? Like when you're over there, the last thing you want to do is not be ready. And so when we went, and this is not downplaying the risks and the dangers all there, but also when you're a junior grunt, the thing you're more afraid of than the enemy is your team leaders. And so like even overseas, when you're deployed, the thing you're worried about is messing up. The thing you're
Right.
worried about is tripping, doing something stupid, pointing the wrong way, and so you're just kind of constantly in this spot of. And I did mess up a bunch. I was overall fortunate during my time in Afghanistan. There's nothing like I tell people like a Saving Private Ryan moment where everything went to chaos. There was normal activity. There's a normal sort of things, but especially with kind of the kinetic operations, it tends to be things go off, happens really quick, and then it settles down, right? There wasn't huge, Taliban armies that we face. As more, pop shots here and there, and tracking down people, or doing more direct action type of stuff. When I was overseas, people, unfortunately, there was a KIA, some wounded, and some major operations. So that was always sort of present. Obviously, there was this inherent danger and hypervigilance there. But overall, I do think I was fairly lucky that there wasn't any major injury or any major. I wouldn't say there was a specific point of trauma, but there was the normal. You're in these very unique, intense, stressful situations where you do also just have to rely on your training. I do remember there was one point where I was nervous on the helicopter going to the target, and just kind of had to take a deep breath in, and my life's in the hands of my training and those around me, and that's a kind of, I wouldn't say accepted death, but accepted the what was out of my control.
Yeah, you knew where you were going, what you were doing, and everybody's got to rely on everybody. And you do your 4 years, you come out as a specialist E4. At that point, I think you decide to go back into finance as a career. But that time in Afghanistan doesn't leave you alone. You have some TBI and PTSD issues that have to be dealt with as part of the reintegration into civilian life.
Yeah. And actually, slight correction, I came out as a sergeant, and so I was like fortunate enough to be a section leader in it. But yeah, and then what a lot of, again, civilians don't realize is beyond the PTSD, and I had to figure this out later. A lot of us are near a lot of concussive explosions, and what we're learning about more and more is these explosions can cause TBIs that build up over time, almost similar to athletes that, get physical concussions all the time. And so there's a lot of veterans that have been quietly suffering from being around all these blast damages that just haven't healed, or, just sort of alter how the brain functions normally.
And I suspect you went through sort of all the normal healthcare processes to try to deal with those problems, which led you to the looking at psychedelic therapies. But am I correct that you kind of went maybe through the VA, maybe not, just sort of through all the normal steps?
Absolutely, and some steps on my own. I was diagnosed with PTSD after a certain amount of time. The VA finally got back to me. And I was already struggling. And what my struggles looked like was just really diving into deep depressions at times, hypervigilance in public places, severe anxiety at certain times that would, almost sometimes make me call in from work, self-medicating with alcohol to overcome it. Sort of unfortunately a normal checklist for a lot of veterans out there. And when I went to the VA, one decision I did make was I don't want the first thing for me to do is just get on medication. And what I just quickly realized is when I saw the social worker who was going to set me up to a therapist, there really wasn't an option. It was kind of a tied package that if you saw the therapist and they recommend a medication, if you deny it, then there's only so much treatment they can give you. But at the same time, I was trying to do everything right. Like I was trying to get back in shape. I was trying to have good social hobbies. I was trying to journal and even meditate, and they helped to some extent. But I was always kind of stuck in this swamp where maybe the water would get a little bit lower, but I was still dragging my feet, and I just didn't know what to do because it was just clear that Western medicine, modern medicine just didn't have the answers. It was more approach that, hey, you have PTSD. For many, this is a lifetime sentence. And the reason I didn't want to go on medication at the time, and not knocking medication, there's a time and place and quite effective for many, but it is often the case that you just tend to be on it for years and years and years as more of a maintenance sort of thing. Many people go decades still on the medication and still have degrees of PTSD.
Well, and that's, we're not, I'm not knocking any of those traditional regular approaches, the medication, the counseling, group, individual therapies. They're all tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
They work for some problems, some people, maybe they don't work for others. What I'm interested in is how did you then gravitate towards, hey, let me look into psychedelic therapies. What kind of got you headed in that direction? And tell us about those experiences.
Yeah, so I'm probably at that point, I was just like any average person out there. I personally had never done psychedelics. I never had an interest. I didn't consider myself one who did drugs beyond, my vice was alcohol, and that was for other reasons. But I could have lived the rest of my life and been happy of like, oh, I've never done psychedelics. Cool. But like I said, after I left the VA, things continued to get worse. And I just saw the warning on the walls that if I didn't do something, this would end up very bad, whether slow or quick. But no matter what, I knew the direction I was going was not good. And at some point you get to an irreversible spot. And I wanted to avoid that. And so bored at work while I was, doing a financial model, was just listening to a podcast, and it came up and somebody was talking about their journey to the psychedelic that's common in the Amazon. And at first I just listened, background. And like I said, I was not interested in, so it was just kind of an interesting story. And then even afterwards, because he was talking more about like seeing all this kind of stuff, I was like, cool, I don't need an escape, right? I need to figure this stuff out. But for whatever reason, it stuck with me. And the more I looked into it, the more I saw these other stories of people actually having pretty profound healing and help by it, and not just escapism, but in actually helping their depression, anxiety. And again, I was like anybody else, that I had my doubts of like, how the hell is this psychedelic going to help you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But there was early evidence too. And at some point I just took a leap of faith. because I really just ran out of options, and was one of those, like, I can't continue what I'm doing. There doesn't seem to be answers here, so let me give this a shot. It doesn't seem to be life threatening, so at least I can go into this, and who knows, maybe I'll mix some stuff up, and I can continue on with my life. I really had no
And,
idea. I was just really jumping
and
into.
there's sort of side of the United States medicine. There's this long native traditional medicine experience with I think it's called ayahuasca is the and ayahuasca ceremonies, and this is the Amazon experience that you're talking about. And there's been a lot of research on this now, focusing on psilocybin and MDMA. But did you go overseas? Did you go have the experience somewhere? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I had to essentially, find this was 2016, so far less information than there is out there today. So on like chat forums of how do you do these illegal drugs in different countries and, not get in jail or killed. And fortunately found a spot that I trusted, and had to book my own ticket, figure it out, and traveled to Peru. And to your point, that was the other thing that opened it up for me is when I looked into it, these substances, whether it's ayahuasca or whether it's mushrooms or all these others, have been used for thousands of years by various indigenous people and various cultures. And for me, that was the difference between it just being a recreational drug and something else there. It's like, well, it's not likely that they're doing this and it's drastically harming the tribe. Like, that doesn't make sense for longevity of any sort of population, right? There has to be something there if they've been doing it for so long. And it was kind of against that sort of recreational thing that I really didn't self-identify with. So yeah, I had to go to Peru and sign up, and the experience was deep in the Amazon at the center, and it went over about a week.
And again, you weren't going for a let's get high experience. You were going for a healing experience. Tell us about the healing experience.
Yeah, so going through it, it was actually very challenging, because, and what we see now, when you're in these focused, concentrated experiences, and there's not a lot of distraction beyond some local, like, indigenous music that they sing. What the psychedelics often do is it heightens your senses, and in the heightening of the senses, it brings up a lot of emotions, which is part of the reason it works. Is veterans are subject matter experts at compartmentalization and pushing down emotions, but this shuts down certain parts of the brain that help shut that down. And so a lot of this stuff comes up, and then you're forced to process it instead of running away from it. And so within that, it's almost this bundle for me of anxiety and the fears and the traumas, all this kind of coming up in a ineffable way, not even in imagery or not even in hallucinations, but just in feeling and being surrounded by a ball of anxiety. And so it was absolutely challenging. It felt like the worst possible spot. And at the same time, you're feeling discombobulated because you're under this substance. And it happened 2 nights like that where it just became super challenging. But within that, there was already the seed planted that, okay, well, this is not this hippie go fun experience that everybody was saying it was. So there's something to it. And, as a ranger, when something's challenging, you run right into it until one of you either the wall falls or you fall over. And so, there's the intrigue in that, even though I had sort of the stigma that, oh, is this going to make me go crazy, or what this doesn't feel right. And, in a way that I can't even explain, but I continued.
So somebody's guiding you through all this, as I understand it.
Correct. But it tends, there is a guide there, but a lot of it tends to be, once you're under the substance, they're just there to make sure that you don't freak out or that you continue breathing. So they're sort of there as guidance, or like I said, there's music going on. But when you're in it, you kind of have to figure it out. It's essentially showing you the cave with the dragon and encouraging you to go through, and you kind of have to figure out what you're going to do to conquer that dragon or make friends with that dragon.
So it's about a year after that experience, you set up Heroic Hearths Project. Tell us about that nonprofit, and for those who are going, I want to get there. The website is heroichearthsproject.org. Tell us about setting that up and sort of the mission and the goal.
Yeah, so real quick, after my experience, I mean, I felt amazing. It felt like, one, it helped physiologically with my TBI, that I was like, oh, this is actually how my brain should function. And in the weeks and months following, the depths of depression, anxiety that I felt almost constantly, and even the hypervigilance in crowd spots, it was just almost no longer there. There were still days I was anxious or sad or what have you, normal human emotions, but it wasn't the swings that it had been before. And it was this sort of reset that, hey, I can build something off of this. It's not so steamrolling of my life that I'm just making bad decisions. I feel decent on a continuous basis. I'm out of the swamp, right? I found the land, and so now I can actually walk. And at that time, what we call integration is you still have to make positive reinforcements of that. You still have to make the good decisions. If you go back to old patterns, likely old issues are going to come, right? So you need to find new friend groups or find new activities, or rebuild your life, lose weight, eat healthy, have positive mental health practices. And I didn't have any guide because there really wasn't any sort of resources back then. And the more I was talking to people, veterans, the more I saw more people are struggling. And at that point, I had lost count. I had already lost over a dozen people I'd served with to suicide, unfortunately. So it's just this apparent thing that I felt extremely lucky I had stumbled into this personally. And I could just feel that it wasn't isolated to me, that there was this massive problem going on around me without any answers, but no resources. And almost as this obligation, the more I tried to figure out, okay, what's next for me, the more this sort of thought that I couldn't escape is, hey, you know something that can help others, and you have the power to do it. And so you can either walk away from that, or you can make something of it. And at that point, I didn't really have that much money. I'd left my job. The last thing I wanted to do was start a nonprofit. I'd prefer to start a for-profit so I could actually make some money.
Back to the economics graduate, yes.
Exactly. That's 101. But, I just realized that there was something to this. And so I started the nonprofit, one, to talk veteran to veteran about these, hey, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, these are the dangers, these are the risks, but these are also the potential benefits. I'm not trying to, convert you to anything, to make it a more of an approachable conversation than what people instantly think of psychedelics, either hippie or a cult or woo-woo or what have you.
It had to be normalized, and it's taken a decade. Yeah. And there's a lot of clinical research going on at the University of Colorado Boulder, at the University of Georgia, at Johns Hopkins Medical Center, all names people recognize, where, it's a decade later, it's a decade of toiling here. But all that research, all those experiences, normalize it and bring it to U.S. veterans who can't buy a plane ticket and go to Peru. Status is of its acceptance by the federal government, the VA, kind of what you see as the next set of steps.
Yeah, and so that's what Heroic Hearths has been doing for the last almost 10 years now. We've been connecting veterans to spots where it's legal, providing full frameworks of support and guidance and intake. We've served over 1,500 veterans, and we've contributed to the growing amounts of research. And across the board, it's all shown effective for PTSD, depression, anxiety. We've seen statistically significant results. And like you said, these major universities, Stanford, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, have all confirmed this. And so it's almost a question of when as opposed to if. Everybody who's looking at these research are saying this is a pretty phenomenal transition that will help happen in mental health. Don't fully know how it will happen, but it's pretty clear that these are coming. So the next steps, we also have merged with an organization called Healing Breakthrough. So we have people that are in DC constantly talking to politicians, normalizing that conversation there. A lot of those conversations helped with the recent EO, and then some of these other bills like Senator Sheehy, just pushing forward. Then politics gets complicated because you need appropriations, you need these pathways, you need these committees to approve. But we're actually, what most people think is within a year of psilocybin, which are magic mushrooms, from getting approved by the FDA. We're pretty close with MDMA, which is the chemical of ecstasy. Some of these other ones are farther behind, like the ibogaines and the ayahuascas. But both psilocybin and MDMA are very powerful in their own right and can have similar sort of efficacy in terms of treating a lot of these issues that previously didn't have good answers. And so that's what...
Part of that, Jesse, is you've got to have drugs cleared by the FDA, right?
Yes.
You've got to have quality and efficacy, and those two in particular, there are pharmaceutical sponsors, I suppose, or proponents, drug companies who are saying, hey, we can deliver the right dosage and right quality. That's got to be swirling around in the background as well, I assume.
Absolutely. And for anybody who's not a big fan of big pharma, these are smaller organizations that have worked with it. So it's not like the Pfizer. I'm not saying Pfizer's won't get along, but this is not sort of a economic, mystery evil person behind the scenes doing this. This has been very much bootstrapped from day one. And so, they're moving forward. You have to go through clinical trials, just like you said, efficacy, safety. Every drug has to go through that. And so those are pretty close. But once that happens, there's still a lot of work because it still has to get into the VA. There's a lot of implementation. You need therapists and peer support to be trained to a certain level. Psychedelics are odd enough, as you can imagine, hallucinations. Doctors like controlling of every aspect. And if you just have somebody that's, tripping, for lack of a better word, for 4 hours, that's kind of counter to how we normally treat mental health. There are some overlaps, like MDMA works with like talk therapy, psilocybin can in certain circumstances. So there's overlaps, but there's going to be a lot of new learnings and new trainings of how does this adapt to our system. But I do think in terms of what we've been seeing, it really will relieve a lot of the mental health issues that have been lacking tools. Like you said earlier, these are not for everybody, but the more tools, the better, and they can be quite effective. And so you saw even with MDMA, the results were, and this was treatment-resistant PTSD, 67% of the people who went through that no longer had PTSD. That's more than double of what the VA has to offer with their medications right now. And over 80% of them actually had significant benefit from it. We're seeing pretty significant results with other psychedelics as well, of just either eliminating PTSD or really helping with it, as well as other mental health considerations. So we're close. So the light is coming. You can see it towards the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of work to be done. And so that's always what I say to veterans that are struggling and losing hope. Like, hope is around the corner. I know patience is hard, but there are organizations that can work with you in the meantime. But it is a better spot to be alive in terms of mental health than it was 30, 40 years ago.
So if people want to know more about what your organization is doing, or maybe how to get involved or sponsor it, or just learn about it, these psychedelic treatment options that may be coming, where should they go?
So heroichearthsproject.org is our website. And our main social media is Instagram, so Heroic Hearths Project. We are a registered national 501c3 nonprofit, so our ability to serve veterans, and we also serve military spouses, so they can also sign up. But it all depends on donors. There's still no real government funding for this. There's still no major businesses, so it's just been very generous donors that have helped us serve it. But even $5 helps from other people. We also, if people want to become advocates, or if people want to support as ambassadors. There's many different ways that you can tap in, but at the very core, if you are interested in this, you can go to our website, learn more about it. We have tons of information, and then we have the application again for veterans and spouses, and they can fill it out, and we have a whole robust intake process. And we try to make it as safe as possible. We have a 3 multi-step intake, which is one of the best in the business. And we have we work with people 6 weeks prior to get them ready. We work with the top level retreat centers, and then we stick with them to build community afterwards and help them integrate. So it's a full multi-month robust program, but once you're in the community, you're always in the community. So we're trying to really bring this, even until it's accessible through the VA or through insurance or what have you. We're trying to bring as robust access today to the veterans and their families that need it right now.
Well, you're doing interesting and important work, Jesse Gould, founder and president of Heroic Hearths Project. It's a great website with a lot of information, and we really appreciate the time you've given to Veterans Radio today, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate the conversation.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA, can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. We also want to thank our local sponsors. This would include the Charles S. Kettles chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, that's chapter 310, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.